Hello everyone and welcome to The Green Flame, the deep green resistance broadcast that brings you radical analysis, practical skills, and artistic expression from the revolutionary movement to defend the planet and rebuild just human communities. I am your host and comrade Max Wilbert.
My name is Ina-Maria Shikongo. I am from Namibia. I am an orphan of war. It's been 30 years since we know the definition of peace in this country. And our recon Africa is taking us back into memory lane. My father was a commander. We were fighting for our rights as black people to have the same equal rights. And now today we are fighting recon Africa so they can leave our resources alone. Our water is so precious to our people and our wildlife. We have been experiencing droughts over and over and over again. And today, unfortunately, Recon Africa is coming to take that away from us. What Recon Africa is coming to do in Namibia is ecocide and genocide. To what extent do our lives matter that we have to put ourselves on the front line so we can continue fighting this injustice that is being perpetuated onto our people, onto indigenous people all over the globe? What did we do to deserve this injustice?
World, help us stop these criminals. Thank you.
My name is Juan Carlos Ponce. I'm a member of the Comaway Permanent People's Assembly in Allen. What you can see behind us is all that we have left. It's all that we have left from this extractive plunder as our town was turned into a sacrifice zone. All of this town was turned into a sacrifice zone. They came and destroyed the productive matrix we had for over 100 years. We were the region of pear and apple production. That's all we needed to make a living from. Then the foreign corporations arrived, which can't do this damn fracking in their own countries, and they started doing it here in Allen, turning us into a sacrifice zone, together with all the corrupt politicians. Ladies and gentlemen, you are seeing this. This is all we have left of Allen. I don't know another town that exists which may have the number of children with leukemia that we have. Our children are dying and Europe is responsible because of the companies from your countries. Please think if you would allow your children to be killed by the companies in your own country. This is shameful. In this farm from Expo Fruit that has been cut down, a lot of people used to work here. Lots of people, and now they are in these barrios because they have to move, because there is no work. In truth, this is a genocide. We want you to know that in Allen, we are way above the national average of children with leukemia who are dying. The companies that supply your gas should put in their bills the pictures of the children that are dying so that this gas can be consumed from Vaca Muerta. You need to stop this. This cannot go on. This cannot go on. They are killing us. Nobody likes being killed, so we are asking you. Please stop this damn fracking. Do not consume gas or oil coming from Vaca Muerta. Thank you very much, and I hope this reaches your heart.
Okay, thank you for joining us for The Green Flame today. I am here with Esteban and Sue, who are involved in Shale Must Fall, which we're going to talk about today. So why don't we start with Sue, and then Esteban, would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are, what your background is, and how you got involved in fracking?
Thanks, Max. Yeah, it's great to be here, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to talk about the campaign. So on my background, I suppose I'm based in Ireland. I was raised by environmentalists who were it was a very highly political household. We would have been exposed to kind of a lot of issues, like world issues that most kids possibly weren't exposed to, but it was done in a very loving way. I remember even in our playroom when we were kids, there was some of the photos on the walls were photos of like war photos. I remember there was one of a dead child that had been left on a pillow. And I can remember my dad explaining to me what it was at a very young age and understanding and kind of building that sense of how the world worked and how wrong it was. And So yeah, grew up with parents who definitely wanted us to have a social conscience. So I got into, I think I had my first direct action at 17, where we pulled up some Monsanto sugar beet. And after that trial, kind of witnessing the, Monsanto had their security dogs on site. And then during the court case, we got to see all the surveillance video where they were following activists from Dublin and from everywhere, zooming in on registration, zooming in on faces. And it was just a real eye opener, seeing how it worked and feeling the level of power that even these small groups of people out in a rural area, how everything was so monitored. So just from there on, then always involved in environmentalism and Palestine, a lot of different causes. And then that's kind of been consistent through my life. Currently, I'm organizing mainly with Deep Green Resistance. I would have been the international coordinator for Ireland for Extinction Rebellion last year. And that's where I would have first kind of gotten into the fracking issue, because somebody contacted me about Shannon LNG, which is an LNG terminal that was proposed in Kerry in Ireland. And I kind of started researching it then and started to understand, get a better sense of the absolute insanity of fracking generally, and also the level of horror that it causes, especially in the global south and for Indigenous communities. So yeah, that was kind of my introduction. And from there, I've just learned more and gotten angrier and angrier. And so yeah, that's how I came across fracking first.
Thanks, Sue. All right, Esteban, how about you?
Hi, Max. Well, I'm from Argentina. I'm a scientist, and I spent 10 years of my life in the Silicon Valley working in the US. I got sick and tired of this life and that world of consumerism, among other things, and I wanted to go back to my country and build an eco-village, a self-sustainable multicultural community. So I went back after 10 years and I moved to the area of Mendoza, which is on the west side of Argentina. It's not where I'm from. I am from the capital, Buenos Aires. But I chose Mendoza after doing quite a bit of traveling in Argentina to see firsthand the devastation caused by mega mining, mountaintop mining, which was being done mostly in the northwest provinces. That is where the Andes are, and there's a lot of gold and other minerals and metals, precious metals. The devastation was complete. And then I found out that the province of Mendoza, which is also on the west, farther south, had banned mega mining thanks to a mass mobilization of the people and blocking the roads and civil disobedience kind of actions, non-violent actions in the year 2007, which led to a law that became an example and a paradigm for Argentina's environmental movement, the law that banned mega mining. So I knew that this province had the environmental awareness that I was looking for to build an ecological community there. So I went there and I bought a farm in order to start this project that I set it up as a non-profit. We were offering land for free for anyone from anywhere in the world who wanted to come and be part of the community. We wanted it to be multicultural with no majorities from anywhere, so it would function democratically and no one could impose their will or their prejudices over others. And all was going very well until fracking was introduced at the end of 2017 by the very government that got to power by being activist 10 years earlier against mining. So in a place like Mendoza, where water is very scarce because it's a desert, people have the awareness, the consciousness of defending their water in their DNA. And this cuts across political lines. It doesn't matter if they're conservatives, progressives, they all defend their water. And this also wins you votes. So the people that were in the mega mining fight, many of them used that to catapult themselves into power. So the governor back then in 2017 introduced fracking by an illegal, unconstitutional executive order in Mendoza. And we were unlucky enough that Mendoza is sitting on top of the world's second largest shale gas basin and fourth largest shale oil basin, known as Vaca Muerta, near the size of Denmark, and which the UN has warned will consume 15% of the entire global carbon budget that we have left to comply with the 1.5 degrees set in the Paris Agreement. This is how grave a global threat this is. So I don't want to make it too long, but that's when I turned into an activist. I wasn't before. I was more trying to have a more sustainable life. But they came and destroyed our land, our area, our region, and threatened everything, not just my project. So I found out that there was a secret study the government was keeping secret, an environmental impact study over the first wells of fracking in Mendoza, because it was revealing contamination of the water tables by the first wells. And they were planning to replace the results with fake ones that were going to be conducted at a lab located inside a university where the vice dean was a representative of the fracking company at the same time. So I managed to get a copy of this report from a whistleblower, and we created EcoLeaks, inspired by WikiLeaks, but in a very South American fashion with low tech and just a lot of urgency to get this out. And well, this helped build a lot of mobilization, tens of thousands of people on the streets, and I can continue later, but this is how fracking got into my life.
So Esteban, I know we want to move on and talk about Shale Must Fall here, but I gotta ask you to continue a little bit further, because after you released that report, that wasn't the end of it for you personally, and there's a reason, right, that you're no longer living in Argentina today.
Right, that was the end for my projects because it became a war. The government started to attack us on every angle possible. I became the biggest target for persecution, for criminal cases being fabricated. Not only were we fighting the government and the multinational companies, but also the company that started fracking Argentina that was also owned by the biggest media conglomerate in the province. So the media were not only silencing us, they were actively operating against us with fake news and defamation, and also the weaponized justice system. So I became the person of Argentina with the highest number of criminal cases against me. They made up all kinds of things. They even planted drugs on our farm, followed by a media campaign saying that we were drug dealers and should be put in jail, which failed as well. They tried to take over the farm, invading a part of it with forged documents made by the government and using the bulldozer from the government to break the fence and destroy a native forest of endangered species of trees in one of the corners of the farm. And then endless criminal cases, charges against me, stupid, such as public intimidation. One of the charges I have is public intimidation because they said I was responsible for making the people of the province panic by feeding them false information when I was only speaking the truth about the scientific knowledge on fracking all over the world. So then all kinds of things happen and death threats. And then we had a very intense year of fighting of 2018. The government persecution against many people intensified, not just against me. Some were put in jail. Some had to leave the province for internal exiles into Buenos Aires or neighboring provinces due to threats. It's really a mafia. And many places of the province are small towns where everyone knows everyone. So if they saw you at a protest and you have any relatives working for the government or working for, keep in mind in these areas, most people work in one way or another for the state, because if you're a teacher or you're an administrative worker or the national bank, it's all depending on the state. So they use that to tighten the grip on people and scare them away from mobilizing. And then to finish, at the end of 2018, they approved a code of conduct for Mendoza that resembles what we had in the dictatorship years of the 70s, that makes it illegal to call on demonstrations that makes it, they can put you in jail or give you a big fine, and they can do the same if they say that you insulted the governor or some public official on social media. This was in September 2018, and that was like the nail of the coffin for the movement. And after that, it was all downhill. People more and more scared. Also, an economic crisis of tremendous proportions was keeping people from being able to eat, and the problems were multiplying. The fronts of battle were many, so every front became weaker. And then at the beginning of 2019, I fired back some of the criminal cases that had been fabricated against me and failed, and I turned them back against the government and filed a lawsuit against the mayor of my city, who had failed one against me. And then is when the death threats against my family intensified, and my girlfriend and I decided to come to Germany. And that's where, probably about a year and a half, we've been in Germany, here in Berlin, trying to continue this fight from Europe until we finish and we win it.
So that brings us right to Shale Must Fall. We're seeing the fracking industry sweep across the world. We're seeing this, unconventional style of oil and gas drilling, sort of metastasize out of the United States, where it has revolutionized the oil industry here and catapulted the US to being the #1 oil producer in the world. Now it's metastasizing all over the world, and we're seeing all of these new projects, fracking projects, export terminals, pipelines, all related to this booming of the fracking industry. So can you tell us, what is this Shale Must Fall coalition and campaign?
Thanks, Max. So Shale Must Fall is a coalition of a lot of different organizations and groups and activists who are all coming together to fight against these monsters who are wreaking havoc and destroying lives and ecosystems all over the planet. And another aspect of what we're trying to do is joining the dots, so that nobody, they want us to feel isolated from one another as activists, but they also don't want anybody to have a clear image of what's going on, who's connected, where this stuff is moving to and from. So we want to try and create an overview so that we can actually fight against them in a strategic way. So that's kind of one of the aspects of it. Another aspect is the kind of global South solidarity. It's linking in with people who are on the front lines and actually delivering their testimonies, highlighting their stories, and using the privilege that we have in Europe, for example, to demonstrate and for taking action, and the leniency in many areas that we have with the police that is not available to them. So to try and highlight their work and their campaigns and their issues in as much as we can, because we're chronically aware that we're the beneficiaries of these absolutely horrendous things that are happening to them and their communities and their land base. So we're absolutely obligated to try and do something about it. It's come together as a really vibrant, active group of really amazing activists. So I know I'm certainly very excited about it. I'm sure you are as well, Esteban.
Yes, and I think the potential is huge for connecting the global South and the global North, and we are just beginning to scratch the surface of what this means. And given the circumstances that we are doing this in the middle of a pandemic and in a world that is in lockdowns, I am very happy that we can make this happen. However big or small, for me, it's just an ice-breaking moment where we will lay the basic foundation of some human-to-human connections, rather than a world and a climate fight that speaks only of statistics and abstract declarations that sound very nice, but they don't mean anything when the very governments that promote them are actually undermining them, knowingly, deliberately undermining them, sabotaging their commitments by promoting all over the world their companies to do things like fracking that have been banned in their own territories, to destroy the rest of the world, knowing the science and knowing the global warming impact of this industry, which is one of the leading causes of accelerating global warming, that is responsible for more than half of the entire global increased emissions of methane over the last 10 years coming from fossil fuels. So They are knowingly undermining. There is no Paris Agreement possible. There is no 1.5 degrees Celsius possible when fracking goes on. And they are making it go on through Shell, through Total, through Wintershall from Germany, through BP from England, Repsol from Spain, and many, many more. So it's about time that we can bring these criminals to justice, or at least bring the heat on them with their own population in Europe, which, as Sue just said, has the privilege here to do this kind of actions of civil disobedience and demonstrations without getting killed or jailed or murdered or tortured, as it happens in Africa or in many places of South America, Latin America, the global South. So what if we put this privilege from the global North at the service of the struggles of the front line in the global South that are just fighting the very companies that come from the global North? It sounds like a very sensible thing to do, and is way overdue. So I'm very happy that we're getting this going.
So can you tell us a little bit more about, so we've got this day of action, which is December 11th. That's the day that this podcast is going to be released. And we're going to be seeing what type of actions and where around the world do you expect these to be carried out?
So there'll be actions happening in a number of, I'm not sure how many countries at this point, but there's a lot happening across Europe. We have representatives in Africa, some in Asia. And I think one of the aspects of this that I'm most excited about is the fact that we have, for example, activists in Namibia who are on the front line of this, who are writing letters for the other activists to hand into headquarters and embassies and all around the west of the world. So they have this sense that they can get it directly to the people that are destroying their land and their communities. And even though it's only a small gesture at this point, it's still incredibly empowering to have made those connections and to be able to actually link it up. No, this is where it's coming from. This is who we need to target on your behalf, and kind of building that solidarity with the people who are on the front line of this and whose bravery is just beyond awe-inspiring. I mean, reading through the testimonies would break your heart, but would also make you so humbled by the level of courage of these activists all over the world, what they're doing and what they're up against. So the actions are different in every place. Like Shale Must Fall is very much bottom-up movement and organizing. So each region has been kind of designing their own action, and then we're trying to kind of use the Shale Must Fall to pull it all together and give it extra power. But each of the groups has their own, can make their own decisions on what they do. But there is very much that focus on the global South solidarity and highlighting the plight of people in these communities and trying to bring it directly to the doorstep of the companies involved or the governments involved. So that's kind of the main focus, I feel, for what we're trying to get across. But all the actions will be different on the day.
Yeah, here in Oregon, we're planning an action around the fracking industry, which is trying to put in a massive LNG fracked gas export terminal on the southern Oregon coast in a very environmentally sensitive area. And the pipeline to supply this export terminal would cross dozens of rivers and creeks and streams that include some of the last relatively healthy wild populations of salmon and steelhead. Would cross through some, wilderness quality lands, forest lands, and mountain landscapes, and then would end at this terminal that would have to be built by massive dredging out of the bay that would destroy this relatively healthy marine community, the benthic community living in the mud and the substrate and all the clams and mussels and different crabs and creatures that live in there, and then would be shipped overseas and burned. And that to us here is part of the lies that we see around global warming, because when that gas is fracked here in the United States, exported from the United States, and then burned overseas somewhere in Asia, those emissions only count for the Asian country. So we look at this as a way of exporting pollution and exporting greenhouse gas emissions, and basically like a form of money laundering. You can make yourself look much greener than you think you are. And that's something that I think is an issue in Germany and many of these countries around the world, which sort of claim to be a green government and making these green policies.
Exactly, and that's exactly the case. Europe is simply outsourcing its emissions to the rest of the world, looking good on paper, but increasing emissions actually because frack gas is 40 to 60% worse than coal in its carbon footprint. So this is an insane transition away from coal into something worse than coal that is being sold as the best of the best. But there's another reason why shale must fall. Why are we focusing on fracking? One reason is that this is the common denominator for many of the front lines in the global south that needs to be amplified in the global north, where not only are the companies doing this all over the world, but also the governments from Europe are importing this gas in the form of LNG and subsidizing this with billions of euros to build new terminals all over the continent. But another reason why we're focusing on fracking is that fracking could be the Achilles tendon of the fossil fuel industry. Fracking is the weakest point, not economically, not financially, but it's the weakest point communicationally and strategically. Fracking is indefensible. If we start by destroying what is the weakest point and is the worst of the fracking, the fossil fuel industry that has already been banned across most of Europe, there is no legal framework for them to argue against us. And that's why I'm so happy to have met the people of Ireland, which is a country on course to become the first in the world to ban the import of fracked gas. And I briefly would like to say why this is such a tremendous strategy for the climate movement that we could follow to defeat not only fracking and fracked gas, but all of gas and eventually the whole fossil fuel industry. This is the door through which we can enter because no government can defend this as clean gas. And they are trying to do that. But the case of Ireland shows that when they focus on fracked gas, they force their government to admit that this was fracked, and they were rendered powerless because they had lost their biggest communicational tool that was that somehow this was clean energy after having banned fracking just 2 years ago. So after that, they were rendered powerless, and now Ireland, the government, the new government has made a commitment to ban the import of fracked gas and bring down their LNG terminals, which has still to happen. It has not happened, it has not become a law, but it's a commitment that if we can expand around Europe, we can get a great victory for the climate movement. This is low-hanging fruit for us because shale gas is being rejected around the world already. France recently rejected an LNG deal with Texas to import tons of fracked gas. And in Germany, one of the terminals has been brought down for different reasons, but and in Sweden, the government denied an LNG terminal to connect on climate grounds. So if we can continue to focus on what is their weakest point and our strongest argument and come together, we can really defeat it. We can have a huge victory for the climate movement because closing the gates of Europe to fracking would lead sooner or later to the collapse of the industry because Europe is usually the source of fashions and trends and philosophies of the world for hundreds of years. And if we set a new standard, a new environmental standard where Europe says we don't import fracked gas, and we don't allow our companies to frack the rest of the world, sooner or later, investors will divest from fracking. They will be forced by the public opinion, and the rest of the world will have to follow suit, eliminating fracking and eliminating the import of fracked gas. And then we will be on path to defeating the narrative that gas is clean, because conventional gas is not much cleaner either. It's similar to coal. And so already, like in the case of Ireland, people are naturally speaking about this now, that I've been told lawmakers are beginning to talk about the need to ban all gas, not just fracked gas. But they have come to realize this after the Irish activists managed to bring down this billion-dollar narrative that has had so much financing in the major media, and with no money and almost no resources, they brought it down using their weakest point, which was fracking. So I'm just saying, I'm making the case for us to actually have a strategy as a climate movement and attack what is weak on the other side, which in this case, communicationally, is this monster that wherever you look from, is negative. It's making plastics, is connected to the fertilizer industry, is a major cause of global warming, and is causing ecocides all over the world.
So Sue, how can people get involved in Shale Must Fall?
So, as I said, it's very much a bottom-up movement. So that we have groups and organizations, joining our organizing group from all over the world, and like that, they're working away, as they would normally work, making their own decisions, but just connecting into the larger group for support and solidarity, and to kind of unify our message and our kind of focus. Especially linking in with the Global South groups. So one way is to go to the website. We have a new website, which is very much in its infancy, but there's amazing work being done. We're going to, hopefully, this website, which is shalemustfall.org, is going to become an absolute hub of information, and somewhere that people can go and be able to get that overview of what's happening, what companies are doing what, where, who they're connected to, where they're based, and also where people can link in with other, like if they can click on our map and link in with other organizers in their area, or see campaigns that are running in whatever area that they want to look up. So that's one way. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So Shale Must Fall on any of those platforms as well. Just send a message or message into the website. And we will be delighted to get in touch and link you in. And like that, everybody's absolutely welcome. And it's a really fun, vibrant group to be part of. So yeah, we're very chuffed with how it's going. But all the website and everything, I mean, it's very new, so there's loads of work still to be done. But considering how short a time it is since we started organizing, there's an enormous amount that we've accomplished even in that space of time. So yeah, the sky's the limit, I think.
Yeah, and we have to give thanks to Sue and Esteban here for helping spearhead and coordinate this effort so far, and all the other volunteers who've done incredible work, building this coalition and building for this day of action. And it's exciting to me that this is the beginning of something bigger, because it's been my experience being involved in campaigns and coalitions in the past that most people come in without much experience, without many skills, without a real strategic sense of how to build a movement, how to do community organizing and bring people together, build power in your community, and then exert that power against a corporation or against the government to win concessions, to win some sort of victories. And it's exciting to me to see this movement coming together and building power, from a really grassroots sense. I appreciate from the beginning that this has been, not something that's sponsored by one of the big NGO groups or anything like that. This has really been a grassroots effort, and I'm really glad to be a part of it. So Sue and Esteban, is there anything else you want to add before we go?
Well, just to say that the name for the campaign was inspired by the campaign of the Netherlands against Shell, called Shale Must Fall. And they got the name from South Africa, actually, from an anti-colonial fight in South Africa that was trying to bring down some statues from colonizers, which was the name of the statue, I believe, was Rose, and it was Rose Must Fall. And so we really like this concept of solidarity and anti-colonial, and they built this campaign against Shell, claiming, that Shell is built on similar colonial structures as what the South African students were fighting. So in the same way, now we're kind of closing the circle, and inspired by them, now we are doing a play on words on Shell, and that's why it's Shale, but it's going to target not only Shell, but also all the other big multinational criminals that we need to tackle.
Could I just say as well, Max, just to touch on what you said a few minutes ago as well, just to kind of acknowledge the level of work that's been put in by a really large number of people now. There's an enormous amount of people have just stepped into this, and just the level of dedication and love that they've put into it has just been phenomenal. So yeah, I just want to absolutely shout out to all the other organizers and people involved, because they've been amazing. And I'm sure they'll continue to be amazing, because we have other actions planned, hopefully for spring. It's going to continue and build. So
thank you so much, Esteban and Sue.
Thanks, Max.
Thanks a lot.
This is Max Wilbert, one of the hosts of the Green Flame podcast. I want to thank you for listening to our show and let you know a few ways that you can support the Green Flame. First, you can subscribe to our platform using the podcasting system of your choice. We're listed on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pocket Cast, and all the rest. We're even on YouTube. Leaving us a positive review or rating on these platforms helps us reach a larger audience. You can also share these shows with your friends. If you're interested in donating to support the production of the Green Flame, please visit deepgreenresistance.org. And finally, the goal of this show is to activate people. So if you really want to support this show, start organizing in your own community. Thank you again for listening.